That's how we started Free the People. That's why we started Free the People. We are so excited to be here. Right after this, we are going to be going up to the Anthem Film Festival. Last year, we released a movie called How to Love Your Enemy, a restorative justice story. It tells the story of Longmont, Colorado, and this amazing restorative justice program where they have, where an NGO, a nonprofit, works in partnership with the police and pulls people out of the system before they get convicted or even put through a court system. It's so amazingly successful that their recidivism rate in that town is less than 1% for non-violent crimes, as opposed to 60% if you go through the traditional system. So we're showing that today at 6. We're going to have Q&A after that. That movie has actually turned into something interesting. We thought it was just a beautiful story that we were so happy to tell. We released it last year, online of course, because, you know, COVID. But we released it right during the whole George Floyd incident, and there was so much emphasis on restorative justice and the criminal justice system that we then realized, sorry, I just got distracted, but that's a really cute puppy.
You're talking about RJ.
Thank you. So yeah, so we released it online, and this beautiful thing happened. One of our friends, an activist, a supporter of ours at Free the People, said, I want to make this happen in my town, in Vail, Colorado, in Eagle County. So he put together a viewing, socially distant viewing at a pop-up drive-in theater. He had law enforcement, he had police chiefs, he had DAs. I gotta tell you, it's the first time that I've seen a bunch of police cars pull into one of our events, and I haven't thought to myself, oh dear God, what did Matt do now? So this film, it turns out that it's not just a beautiful story, but it's a how-to to help people in their local communities get this gorgeous system enacted. And so that's what we're doing. We've done 2 other showings since then. We're going to do one in Wichita, Kansas. We've got one set in Denver. And we're hoping to bring it here to New Hampshire as well. So if you want me to bring this to New Hampshire, if I make the cut for the pork tank fundraising thing, come see and throw money at me on the stage. I would really, really like that to happen. So, I was trying to figure out a graceful transition from me to him, and let's be honest, there really isn't one. So here's the guy that's going to start quoting dead economists, and I can't guarantee what else he's going to talk about, I'll be honest.
Give it up for my beautiful wife. So this is going to be a little bit different because we spent a lot of time in the last 3 or 4 years actually speaking together, and I discovered the discipline of actually performing on stage with another person, because there has to be certain expectations and rules and things that you sort of signal to the other person so that it doesn't become a total train wreck on stage. But today, for reasons I don't understand, she gave me a blank check to do essentially whatever I want for the next 20 or so minutes. So it's going to be
I can still interrupt.
She interrupts sometimes. So I have some things on my mind, and I want to talk about this in the context of what people are here doing right now, but I have to do it through the lens of dead economists. It's just how I think about the world. But I want to start with a rant, and hopefully some of you agree with me, maybe some of you don't, but this is an unsafe space, so if you're offended, it's going to be okay. When our government decided to lock us down about 1.5 years ago, I almost immediately started thinking about dead economists. Because as a trained Austrian economist, I understand that the entire purpose of a structure of freedom and decentralized knowledge and problem solving from the bottom up, that the best thing to do when life is really radically uncertain is to let people figure it out. But that, of course, isn't what happened. Instead, We were told that the libertarian moment was over with and there are no libertarians in a pandemic. Thank you, thank you. So we needed someone smarter than us, someone more benevolent than us, to tell us how to get through this, even though it turns out they didn't know anything more about this new novel virus than the rest of us did, but they pretended to, because in politics and in bureaucracy, and when you're doing all of these media hits on CNN, you at least sound like you know what you're talking about. Well, the result of that, from a humanitarian point, has been a devastating disaster. The result of it, from a political point of view, has been a fundamental shift towards bigger, more authoritarian, more top-down government. But what could we have done as libertarians? What could we have done as people who believe in things? I'll use a specific example, and you know this example, but I'll put it through a Hayek lens, and if you're drinking right now, you have to drink. When Cuomo decided, and other governors did as well, we can hiss at Cuomo. Cuomo! When Cuomo decided that he knew how to run hospitals better than hospital administrators and doctors and nurses and people that do this for a living in their local communities, he decided to put all of these COVID patients into nursing homes. Well, you know what happened. Hayek would call that a fake and fatal conceit. That's drinking for those of you guys keeping track. But you don't have to be a Hayekian to understand that you don't do this. You don't have to be an Austrian economist to understand that what's happening in Buffalo, New York is very different than what's happening in Manhattan. That every single hospital has a different clientele, a different set of expertise, and what works here might not work there, and that people in their local communities might have an incentive to keep people safe. Can you imagine? Can you imagine responsible people solving problems? But that's not what happened, and we all know what happened. My personal view is that for all of the lockdowns and all of the top-down edicts and everything that the government has done to keep us safe, more people died, we are less safe today, and all the while, we lost all of those freedoms, we lost all of those jobs, we lost all of that opportunity that would have been there if we had allowed a bottom-up decentralized system to solve problems. And here comes the rant part. Not all of my fellow libertarians looked at it that way. Did you notice? Yeah. Some people took a dive. And in my life as a professional libertarian, and I've been a professional my entire life. Well, small p professional. I've gotten paid for what I do, but Terry's like, no, you're not really that professional. But think about it. I'm a little bit older than you guys, but when George H.W. Bush invaded Kuwait, where were we? I was like with three crazy people down on the mall, all wearing tie-dye hippie t-shirts, protesting that invasion. What about 9/11? Where were the professional libertarians? What about the Wall Street bailout? I challenge you to go back and find the professional libertarians that opposed the Wall Street bailout before it happened, before it became the law of the land. It's hard to do. Same thing with lockdowns, and my beef is, if we matter as professional libertarians, we matter at that moment when you stick your neck out. At that moment when your ideas are running against the grain, against the herd, against everybody that's in a panic, they're fearful, they think the world's going to end, and somebody reasonably could step up and say, guys, I don't think this is the right thing to do right now. It doesn't happen enough. I hope all of you, next time we reach that moment, and it's going to be sooner than you think, step up, stick your neck out. It's not safe, it's not comfortable, but it's something that we could do together. And the first person that does it encourages somebody else. And pretty soon you have a community. And pretty soon you have a movement. And pretty soon the people that are trying to impose their top-down will on us are afraid to do so because public opinion has shifted in our direction. That's how it happens, from the bottom up. that's how things happen. So when the lockdowns first started, Terry and I were actually giving a series of lectures in Batumi, Georgia. And that's not Georgia as in the south of America. That is Georgia, the south of Russia. And we were giving a series of lectures on Ayn Rand and objectivism. And for those of you who don't know my story, it was a Rush album when I was 13 years old, 2112, dedicated to the genius of Ayn Rand. Any Rush fans? Show the flag. I was like, who's that dude? But I remembered her name, and I found Anthem at a used garage sale. This is before you could Google stuff for the kids in the audience. And I devoured Anthem, and it changed my life, and I followed those breadcrumbs. And it, of course, was Ayn Rand that told me to read Dead Economists like Ludwig von Mises. And I've always thought she has gotten a bad rap. Because she talks about selfishness. And she's got this sort of rage about her. But if you know her story, maybe you can appreciate what she was thinking about. She was a young Russian girl that grew up in the Bolshevik Revolution, and she watched from her bedroom window down on the square in St. Petersburg as these very violent communists started taking over. And first they were killing people in the streets. Eventually, they came for her dad's pharmacy. And they took everything their family had. And this went on for a while, and eventually she said, I cannot be a free person if I live in this totalitarian world. And as a very young girl, she got on a boat, came to the United States, somehow got to Hollywood, California, became a scriptwriter, and you guys know the rest of the story. But the reason I tell you that is, think about the word, selfishness. And think about the opposite of that, unselfish. She's thinking about the world in the context of growing up in a society that said that yourself doesn't matter. It's the collective, it's not the individual. And so she raged against the machine, and of course, Anthem is about that. And then I read The Fountainhead, and Fountainhead's about that, and Atlas Shrugged is about that. And she was the person that taught me to be angry about the horrible things that big governments do to individuals. And we all know what happened under war socialism and the Bolshevik Revolution. We all know that Mao slaughtered millions and millions and millions of people with his horrible experiment in socialism. And you could talk about Pol Pot, and you could talk about Castro, and the list goes on and on and on today. And yet we still, to this day, have people with their Che Guevara t-shirts thinking it's cool.
I'm going to tell a story.
All right.
We're talking about Rand. So, going to Batumi, Georgia, it's not an easy journey. It took us almost as long to get to Batumi, Georgia as it did for us to get up here over the last 2 days. It's about a 24-hour drive, or flights with overnight stays and all that.
You can't drive.
I know. So, as I mentioned earlier, Matt and I have been together forever. We started dating in college. We met in Grove City College. And the first Christmas that we had together, tell them what really romantic gift you gave me.
Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah. And I read it, and then I read all of the others, and all of that. So it was a test. I'm convinced of that. But the reason that I bring this up is, as we were waiting to come on stage, there were, at the end of the last talk, people were asking, how do you attract more chicks to the movement? How do you get more women here? My answer is, don't give them copies of Atlas Shrugged.
Hey, it worked. I don't understand.
Sort of.
Is that your story?
That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
So, to this day, I will defend Ayn Rand. I understand the historical context and the point she was making, and I think that all of us hopefully embrace an understanding of individualism which to me is a responsibility. When you look in the mirror every morning as an individual, you don't get to outsource that responsibility to somebody else. You have to do it for yourself, and if you have a family member in trouble, or a neighbor in trouble, or a country in trouble, you step up. You don't wait for someone else to do it. To me, that's what liberty means. That's something that I learned from Ayn Rand. But of course, people get turned off by this individualistic approach. So of course, I love Hayek too, right? Any Frederick Hayek fans in the audience? And Hayek and Rand, as I understand it, some people would probably know this better than me, they didn't really connect. They never, maybe they corresponded, I don't remember the history, but they weren't pals, and the way that Mises and Rand had some engagement, not always happy, but engagement nonetheless. And from my point of view, Hayek is not, even though he is a methodological individualist, and he would insist on that, and he famously said that the words social justice were ruined by adding the word social to it, his entire project was about community. It was about the tremendous power of people coming together with all of their personal local knowledge and collaborating and cooperating and competing and doing something together, a complex economy, that none of us could have conceived of individually. So he understood the power of community, and he understood that 1 + 1 sometimes equals 5. How's my math?
Very authoritative.
There's a reason you married an engineer.
And so I think about Hayek a lot when people tell me that there's some sort of conflict between being an individualist, being a radical rage against the machine, get off my lawn, leave me alone, am I being detained, libertarian, versus someone that sees the beauty in community, the beauty in collaboration, the beauty in cooperation, the beautiful diversity, and I'll use the word diversity in the way that it used to mean, meaning that we're all different, we're all special, we all have special talents, we all have special knowledge, and that is an asset to be engaged in a way that really magical things can happen, right? I call it spontaneous order, I call it beautiful chaos, and don't take a snapshot of that, watch the process of people figuring stuff out. If only.
You just described what's happened here at PorcFest, right? It's beautiful chaos, it's spontaneous order, it's people have shown up, they've gathered, they've built communities, people are selling stuff, people are asking, do you have this? People are saying, yeah, I have that, just come to my site. This whole community, this is spontaneous order and beautiful chaos at its finest. As we were driving up today and seeing all of the great vending, it actually made us think about all of the Grateful Dead concerts that we've been to. We would love the community that happened in the parking lots. Markets happened, people took care of each other. When we started going to shows, my mom would get worried. She's like, oh, those deadheads, they do all those drugs. Are you going to be safe? She was really worried about me. And over the course of the years and the over 200 shows we saw, my crowning moment with my mother was, she was in Pittsburgh, and the Dead were coming to Pittsburgh, and we didn't make it to that show. And the next morning, there was an article about the number of people that had been arrested for selling drugs. And my mom called me and she said, I'm so upset. The police, they were just picking on those poor deadheads. They weren't hurting anyone. They weren't hurting people or taking their stuff.
Nice branding right there. So I have one more dead economist to throw at you, the famous Austrian Jerry Garcia. Any deadheads in the audience? Sure. Here's the Jerry. So the reason there might be a metaphor here somewhere between the radical individualists, the purists, and the people that want a sense of community and community responsibility that some of us feel for each other in a setting like this. And Jerry Garcia, who was an anarcho-capitalist. I don't know if you knew this. I'm not sure he knew it, but it was true. He always told his community one thing, again and again and again. And by the way, this community, the Grateful Dead community, has outlived him going on to 26 years now. Dead & Company is touring this fall. Bless their hearts. I will be there. Hopefully you will be too. And Jerry, through all of this, his one commandment to his minions was, do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you how to behave. I am not smart enough or arrogant enough to think that I know enough about your life to tell you how you live. And a lot of people complained about that, and there was plenty of chaos within the Grateful Dead community, but over time, the power of that and the power of the music and the respect that he had for his community allowed for something that looks, to me, a lot like what we have going on here right now. There's a sense of responsibility, there's a sense of connection, but as I understand you guys, nobody gets to tell you what to do, right? Anybody want to be told what to do? Get out! So, think about, I don't know if you guys notice, but sometimes libertarians argue. Are you aware of this phenomenon? Have you followed any of these conversations on Twitter? And I will invoke the great libertarian Jerry Garcia as your guidance for how to move forward in this liberty movement. Do what you want, but don't sit on the sidelines. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Don't tell other people what they're doing wrong. Lead by example. Lead by cooperating and creating and figuring out better ways to attract more women into the liberty movement. I mean, clearly, it's giving them copies of Atlas Shrugged and quoting Jerry Garcia, right? There's no doubt about that. But think about the strategies. I used to call myself a Maoist, and then it got uncomfortable, because Mao said something akin to let 1,000 flowers bloom. Of course, he didn't mean that, and once you spoke up, he killed you. I'm not going to do that. But think about all the strategies that we're pursuing right now. Like, people are constantly saying, how do we get more libertarians to win in office? How do we get more women in the movement? How do we do this? How do we do that? Well, why don't you try what feels best for you? The Free State Project is one of these beautiful experiments that I'm very optimistic about. I think it's tremendous, and it's more Hayek perhaps than Rand in this continuum of strategies where we're bringing people together and we're building a cooperative community. But even within the Free State Project, you guys know this, there's a political strategy, right? One of the political strategies is to take over the GOP in New Hampshire. I think that's super cool. Shh, don't tell anybody, that's a secret strategy. You guys know the governor is aware, right? And I'm a former Tea Partier, so I understand a little bit about attempts to take over one of the two political parties, and I understand a little bit about community organizing, and I love what the Free State Project is doing here. But there's other strategies as well. I'm a big L libertarian now, and I think that presidential politics is a beautiful platform to talk about ideas. I learned this from Ron Paul, who quoted Mises and Rand and Hayek. I don't think he ever quoted Jerry, but I'm not going to hold that against him. And he planted those Easter eggs, right? Ron Paul was the guy that taught a generation of young people to Google Ludwig von Mises and to self-curriculate, to teach for themselves, to learn, to become a movement that was very schooled in that stuff. I think that's an important strategy. And I don't think that either I or Ron Paul or maybe anybody else understood exactly what the implications of that were at the time. So don't, if the big LP is not your thing, that's cool. If it is, come on in, but be constructive. Like, don't spend all your time trashing the other guys that you don't exactly agree with. Maybe think about what you could do to add value to the community. And then there's what Terry and I do. and I'll wrap up on this and maybe there'll be some questions and answers. We like to think that we're upstream of politics altogether. We've done politics, it's a young person's sport.
I'm still into it.
What did you say?
You said that politics was a young people's sport. I said, I'm still game.
That's because you're young. Politics is a thing, that's cool. But we are focused on engaging people who haven't read all of the dead people that I just quoted. They didn't read Rand, they didn't read Hayek, they didn't read Mises.
But hopefully they went to a dead show.
Yeah, it helps if you went to a dead show. And part of that is empathy, right? Actually, if you're engaging people on the left, trying to understand with some empathy where they're coming from, what they're trying to say when they use words that maybe you don't connect with. Same thing with conservatives. I spent a lot of time talking to conservatives as well, and they have a very different tribal set of language that they use. No less legitimate than the left, no less legitimate than the tribal language we use. Notice I haven't said non-aggression principle yet.
But read my t-shirt. Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. That's the non-aggression principle at its pinnacle, right?
Just tell the BLM story.
Oh, I'm going to tell two stories.
Okay.
Because that's what I do.
Gary's going to tell a story.
So, FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education, great organization. A few years ago, they did a poll, they did a study to try to figure out what messaging and what slogans worked with people. Do you know what the number one slogan phrase was that resonated with everyone? Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. And more importantly, it registered the highest with progressives and liberals. Non-aggression principle, nobody really understands that, but everybody in grade school, kindergarten was taught, don't hurt people, don't bite little Johnny, and don't take his crayons, right? So that's really important. The BLM story, we have a very good friend of ours who lives in Cleveland, Ohio. He came to DC for one of the big Black Lives Matters. He's progressive, we still love him. We're bringing him slowly over to our side. But he wore this shirt into that crowd, and he said, I have never had so many people stop me and say, God, that's a great shirt. I love that message. Which is a great segue to say, we have these shirts available at our site for sale. So we're almost out of time. We do have some time for questions. We are on Independence Aisle. We have a shit ton of sites. We have 4 things there. We're going to record a couple Kibbe on Liberty podcasts there. We're selling stuff. We're giving away these awesome cups, very useful. And so, do you have any closing words, or should we just open it for questions?
I feel like I should say something inspirational right now.
Are you going to quote a dead guy?
No. I got nothing. Thank you guys.
No, wait, we've got questions. So anybody have questions?